where are you from? So
what brings you to
Peter
town?
walks over to a wall and does something which produces a three-dimensional map. It was not a hologram because it wasn't projected. It just appeared. It's hanging in space in the room, and it's got glowing stars. It's a star map in 3 dimensions. Well, back in 1961, when these events happened, most Americans knew nothing about 2 dimensions, 3 dimensions, 4 dimensions. Unless you were a math geek, you never thought in those terms. So this was hard for Betty to describe. She's looking at this map and she's puzzled. And the leader says, so here we are, and this is our system. We have a binary star system, and these are our trade routes. So you get it, right? And, obviously I'm filling in. This is not verbatim. Okay, this is not verbatim, but I'm imagining how this must have gone down. Okay, I'm taking a little bit of literary license here. And she says, okay, this is good, but where are we? And he's like, what? You don't even know where you are in the universe? I'm showing you where we are. I'm opening the kimono to show you where we are, and you don't know where you are. So why am I bothering? And Betty's observation 35 years later was the aliens were highly disappointed that these humans knew nothing about astronomy. And if you think about ancient civilizations, they were all in the know about astronomy. The pyramids align with Orion, the stars in the belt of Orion, Sirius,
Completely.
The bright star there. Pyramids all over the world do this. They are aligned north, south, east, west. They point towards star groups. This is not a coincidence. This is part of our star parent heritage. So this alien back on the craft is showing Betty the star map and realizing it's a wasted effort. So puts this map away, basically, makes it disappear. Well, under hypnosis, Betty drew this map. And Stanton Friedman came along as a nuclear physicist who had a keen interest in UFOs in the late 1950s and 1960s. And he analyzed the star. He looked at findings that a school teacher had done. She'd done years of research. She'd found a match to Zeta Reticuli 1 and Zeta Reticuli 2, which is a binary star system, and what Friedman looked at was the stars on the trade routes were all what Star Trek, the fictional show, would call M-class planets, M as in mother, M-class planets, planets capable of supporting life as we know it, as carbon-based entities, okay? So Friedman is saying, based on the fact that any of these planets and star systems here, well, the planets in the star system, binary star system, could support life theoretically, that lends credence to this is actually what the map is about. But I saw another analysis where a researcher had found a map on Betty's office wall of the Normandy invasion of World War II, which is basically troop movements, how
Right.
the troops landed from the ocean and then deployed on the beach at Normandy, the Allied troops. And this person had taken an overlay of the arrows used to show the troop deployments and laid it over her star map, and it was a very good match. And this person wondered if Betty had not superimposed basically the map that she would have been staring at out of the corner of her eye in her office or periodically in her office year after year after year, day after day, if she hadn't subconsciously rendered something else. We will never know. More telling, in my opinion, is her dress, which had a pink residue deposited on it, sent to labs that have never identified what this stuff is. They know what it isn't. In fact, Betty Hill's niece, Kathleen or Kathy Marden, Marden, is probably the world's expert on her aunt, Betty Hill, and Barney Hill, Betty's husband, and has put out a call on her webpage looking for people who do biological analysis, bioanalysis. could somebody take a sample and try to identify positively what this is, not negatively? So the star map is debatable. The dress is physical, at least. It exists. It's not a memory. They had round, oily spots on the trunk of their car, which they associated with a drumming sound that they heard immediately before and immediately after the abduction experience itself while they were driving. Those spots lingered for a very long time, didn't wash off, and had an electromagnetic effect on a compass. If you held a compass near these spots, it whirled around, and when you took the compass away and left it by another part of the car, it behaved differently. And when you took it away from the car, it found true north again. So there were other telltale signs of this abduction experience that we might construe as evidence. But it's very hard to say as a researcher that the evidence is ironclad, if you see what I mean.
I do. But when I was at AlienCon, I was talking with Linda Moulton Howe, and they're fairly confident that this does have a very strong correlation. So, I don't know. We'll just have to wait and find out, won't we? I'm excited about that.
The Betty and Barney Hill case is interesting because of the consciousness component.
Yes.
That Betty called this thing over. And other experiences talk about calling craft, and Dr. Stephen Greer and many other people talk about using consciousness to contact UFOs. And if we as human beings link together and all do it all at the same time, we can amplify our signal, if you will, and have more effect. And that may be true, but I happen to think that an individual's consciousness is plenty sharp enough, as evidenced by Betty Hill's story. Although we don't know that it was her consciousness or her calling that brought the UFO.
Right.
We don't, again, as a scientist, I cannot say that with any certainty. And by the way, my science degree is in computer information systems. I have a master's in that, and my undergraduate background is psychology and education, with French thrown in for good measure because I wanted to go to France, and I did. But another aspect of ufology, as I call it, which is often overlooked, is the staggering preponderance of federal documentation about UFOs. From 1947, probably before, but from Roswell and before Roswell, 1947, the U.S. military was acutely aware that there was a force out there that could literally fly circles around the best of our armament, the best of our Air Force, the best of our boats, of anything. That the Air Force knew, the Army knew. They weren't necessarily telling the presidents, because Eisenhower said, I don't need to know. If I don't need to know, I don't want to know. Mm-hmm. He was highly compartmentalized because he had been a very effective general in World War II. He was a war hero, became president. He said, I don't need to know, so don't tell me until I need to know. And then I can say I don't know. And this has been a very effective strategy amongst U.S. presidents. But meanwhile, the military has been hoarding plenty of evidence that they at least believe UFOs exist, that they have been collecting and retrieving and collecting, I should say, downed craft, figured out how to crash UFOs with radar until the ETs figured out how to counteract that, I guess, or it's still going on. I don't know. I don't claim to know it all. All I know is what I read from reports. But one thing about about acknowledging that I have psychic talents, which I have done since I was 14 years old. I knew I had psychic abilities since I was 14, and I tell you all listening, you all have psychic abilities. Anyone who claims otherwise is pulling your leg. And like a muscle, these can be developed. And I've spent years of my life developing that muscle and that talent, but you don't need to do what I did. You can do it any way you like and exercise your psychic abilities.
And I'm going to interrupt you. Right
Okay.
now, we need to go to break.
Very
So
good.
I will be right back.
Listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experienced Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Well, just like that, here we are. We are back, and Jean, I hated to interrupt you. We were on such a roll.
But I'm going off on a tangent, which I love to do. I was reading the comments, and I see one from Tim talking about the Fermi paradox.
Mm-hmm. I saw that.
Although it tickled my mind, I wasn't familiar with it. So, avid researcher that I am with an endless need to know, boundless curiosity, I went to Wikipedia, and I looked up Fermi paradox. And it says that Enrico Fermi, who lived from 1901 to 1954, used reasoning basically to argue the case that given the probability that alien intelligences exist elsewhere in our galaxy and the universe, why aren't they here now? And he found no evidence. See, in an informal conversation, Fermi noted no convincing evidence that aliens are here, leading him to ask, where is everybody? Mm-hmm. Well, to answer that question, that's a great one, by the way, and I love great questions. I'm not the only one who believes not only are they here, but we're here because they came here. We're here because of them. Mm-hmm. That many, and I mean no disrespect to any Christian listening, I have looked at the Bible as a researcher and as a metaphysicist, a person who wants to know spiritual truths. And I regard the Bible as a source book, but I look at it much less as a mythological compendium, as an actual history. When I read in Genesis, in those days there were giants, the statement was so matter of fact, it took me aback. Like everybody knows. It got so little mention at that part of the story. In those days there were giants. Like everybody knows that. And there are people who have done cataloging of references to things in the Bible. There's a term for that. I'm not a Bible scholar. But be that as it may, biblical reference, lots of things are talking about the biblical, the biblical prophets, like Ezekiel, taken up above the earth, looked down, could see the roundness of the earth, the shape of the earth. I think a lot of what's in the Bible is true story, not myth. And I think there's evidence plenty on earth that aliens have been here all along